10 to 15 years ago, the state of Japanese gaming was much better. You had tons of Japanese role playing games, but not only that, but you even had several installment series where you had the whole game being split over 3 games. Kind of like, how movies used to be called insert movie name here, insert movie name here, part 2, insert movie name here, part 3, and stuff. Well, you had that a lot with Japanese games. You had the Dot Hack series and its successor series, Dot Hack GU, which had several games and, well, the ability to import your previous save file over the next one. You also had Xenosaga and, of course, the Digital Devil Saga series, where both of them would allow you to beat one game and transfer your save over to the sequel. Kind of like what the Mass Effect series does? And kind of like what many Western role playing games do, many Japanese role playing games, though not as many as Western role playing games, took pages out of the pen and paper game playbook. For example, Final Fantasy Tactics had its own class system, where you could actually choose which class your character was, even for your main one. And of course, also several other games, such as the Shin Megami Tensei series, would allow you to change the stats of each of your characters and pick a stat when you leveled up. At the same time, there were more independent gaming companies in Japan, such as Enix, Hudson, Taito, Cave, and more. Many of them have either closed down, been purchased by another company, or don't make games like they used to. I mean, Atlas, for example, they just got bought by Sega. And let's not forget Capcom's financial issues and how Square Enix actually had to purchase a Western publisher to stay relevant. At the same time, however, gaming in Japan has gotten less and less relevant to the whole international gaming community. Ever since the original Xbox launched many developers who were not console developers onto consoles, more and more games have been released on console and PC at once, while fewer and fewer Japanese games have been relevant as Japanese gaming developers have been losing touch with what made their games big in the first place. For example, Final Fantasy XIII was a well-known example of what happened when a series lost its way, and ended up becoming well-known for being a linear walk-in-the-line-to-win game sprawling 3 discs. While at the same time, the PlayStation 3 did not have the same JRPG reputation the PlayStation 2 did. If anything, many of the JRPGs that generation were on handheld systems and not consoles, further alienating the audience for Western gamers, as in the West, gaming is mostly done on consoles and not handhelds. And it's kind of a shame, as starting with the Super Nintendo generation and ending with, like, let's just say the PlayStation 2 generation, the Super Nintendo, PS1, and PS2 were both known as gaming systems to have loads of Japanese role playing games. And some Japanese role playing games, notably Final Fantasy VII and the Pokemon franchise, even crossed over into the mainstream and became smash hits, further causing more Japanese role playing games to be localized. And by the end of the PlayStation 2 era, you had games that had never made an appearance in the West making their first appearances, such as the Shin Megami Tensei series. But of course now, gamers in the West aren't talking about the new Japanese role-playing game series, but instead games such as The Witcher 3, Dragon Age Inquisition, and of course, let's not forget the whole 3-part Mass Effect series, and also Skyrim, which sold a ton of copies, and I think pretty much nearly everybody played last gen. In fact, Skyrim was such a sales success that it sold nearly as many copies as Pokemon Red and Blue did, and Skyrim wasn't one game being sold as two either. And I mean, even people who weren't even playing role-playing games were playing Skyrim, as it had massive crossover success, kind of like Minecraft did. So, what went wrong with Japanese role-playing games? I think the game I'm going to talk about now is going to explain our answer to this problem. The game? Hyperdimension Neptunia ReBirth 1. Now, this is basically yet another game in the Hyperdimension Neptunia series. Now, despite the first game coming out in 2010, the game has had 6 games, 3 main series, 3 spin offs, and of course, it's also had 3 remakes of the 3 main series games on the PlayStation Vita. And honestly, the only franchise I can think of that's milked more than this is maybe Pokemon and Five Nights at Freddy's. The latter because it hasn't been out for a year yet, and yet they're still milking it by making the third game in it. And Pokemon because of the sheer amount of spin offs it has, along with the fact that it's a yearly game franchise. But honestly, Neptunia doesn't even sell millions and millions of games like the other 2 series I mentioned do. So why do they keep milking Neptunia again? Honestly, I'm not sure, but let's take a look into the game to see what makes this game so special, right? So the first thing to take note of are the system requirements. Windows 7 64-bit, Core 2 Duo, 2.66 GHz, 4 gigs of RAM, DirectX 10 or OpenGL 3.3 with a gig of video RAM, DirectX 10, 7 gigs of hard drive space, a DirectX 9 capable sound card, which is pretty much every sound card, and of course a note saying it might not work well with Windows 7 and 8 for 32-bit, and it also says that onboard GPUs are not recommended. It also says something about the game being in glorious HD. We'll investigate these claims in a second, but also take note of what the game recommends. An i3, 6 gigs of RAM, and of course DirectX 10. Now just for a little bit of context, Crysis 1 has lower system requirements than this game, along with other early DirectX 10 games such as Bioshock, and of course DirectX 9 games from around the same time frame such as COD 4. They have lower requirements than this game. So yeah, let's take a look at this game, shall we? Now the first thing you'll notice with this game is that it does not work with the controller or auto-detect your controller out of the box. You see, you actually have to go into the game's config menu and change the controller settings. The game also launches in windowed mode for some reason instead of full screen at a low resolution. I'm not even kidding, it does this. Even if you have it set to 1080p or whatever, it'll just display in a window. And there's no option for borderless windowed, which seems to be the new thing with PC games these days. The highest resolution the game will go up to is also not 1080p, despite being advertised as HD on the Steam page. It only goes up to 1600 by 900. Now, while this could eventually get patched, it's still something to note, as it's false advertising. However, if you go into settings with your keyboard and mouse and change the controller, you can actually use the controller with this game, as the game does support X input and display Xbox 360 button prompts for most of the game. Keep in mind I said most, because at least with one part of the game, they even kept the PlayStation button prompts intact. I mean, look, triangle. What is this, a PlayStation Vita? Oh wait, no, this is a PC game using an X input controller. Shouldn't they have at least bothered to change it to Y instead of triangle? Now, I'll talk about the graphics again in a second, but first I'll bring them up here for pacing reasons. Basically, the graphics in this game are not technically impressive whatsoever. Despite having DirectX 10 as a minimum requirement, the graphics still look like that of a PlayStation 2 game. I mean, I'm not even joking. Even on the original platform, they were not technically impressive in any way, shape, or form. I mean, if you've ever played, like, let's just say, a PlayStation 2 game such as Digimon World Data Squad, they look exactly the same as this game. In fact, there are games such as Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne that look a lot better, mainly because they have a better art style too, but I'll get to the art style and the aesthetic of the game later on, along with talking about the graphics. The game also had a little bit of screen tear on my GTX 760M GPU. Now, of course, you might be wondering why I'm complaining, Well, here's the thing. This is a DirectX 10 game. This is not a DirectX 9 game. This is not a DirectX 7 game. This is a DirectX 10 game. You know, using the same graphics API that games such as BioShock used, or Crysis. And of course, this company could not optimize for anything, because on the PlayStation 3, Neptunia Victory runs at about 15 frames a second as well. So this game is not technically impressive. In fact, it's just badly optimized. And why is this a big thing? Not only because this is a PC game, but this is also part of the same genre that years ago had technically impressive games such as the Final Fantasy series. And of course, let's not forget how Square Enix back in their day were like what people see DICE or Epic Games as or Crytek as today. The leaders of graphics in their field. I mean, go look up the Final Fantasy VI 3D tech demo where they used expensive high-end Silicon Graphics Unix workstations to produce amazing for its time 3D graphics back when Final Fantasy was usually seen as a 2D game. And now let's talk about the premise of the game. Now, the premise of the game is basically the console war with Mo anthropomorphism, which means titties. Since after all, Mo anthropomorphism is where you take, like, I don't know, something, and then you make a kawaii desu girl with bouncing anime titties based off it. It's also a real lazy way to attract, basically, every single weeaboo neckbeard to your game, as all you need to do is just add anime titties and boom, they'll happily buy your game. Just take a look at what happened to various other gaming series, such as the Dudonpachi series. Take a look at, like, let's just say the first one, and then, like, the newest one. That's all you need to know, people. Or compare Autometus Excident with Gradius. Just do that, and you'll see what I mean about this whole dumb trend. The cutscenes also continue the whole fanservice-y trend, with bouncing boobs. And of course, did I even mention the visual novel style of it all? With basically characters standing there, you pressing A or X depending on your system to read lines, and well, that's really it. Even as stuff happens, they just stand there and fade in and fade out. Because that's what the cutscenes are in visual novels. I mean, I've seen more going on in the cutscenes in goddamn Pokemon than I have in any cutscene in this game, because they just stand there with their boobies bouncing. Because their boobs bounce like crazy in this game just by standing still and doing nothing. Yet if you play an actual Japanese role-playing games, you'll actually see stuff going on in the cutscenes. For example, compare a Square Enix game to this, where they're just standing in front of a monitor talking. And it also does not help that the dialogue is all badly written, relying mostly on jokes, and only 4 kinds of jokes: puns, the fourth wall, nerd humor and references, and fan service. All with the voice acting done by teenagers in an indie game. Yes, I've seen Freedom Planet have better voice acting than this.
Hello? Is anyone here? I hope I don't step on your figures or anything. It could be leftovers. Do I just wait for more text boxes to pop up? I should have finished my game backlog and erased everything on my HDD. How can I calm myself when someone can look into my special HDD collections? Soul Sword? You mean Soul... Wasn't it the Excalibur that was stuck?
Okay, so let's first get those clothes off you.
Okay, taking my clothes off. Wait, why do I have to go nude? I don't need to make myself more powerful.
I can't bandage you with your clothes on. No need to be shy now.
Well, I get that, but...
Okay, here comes the wrap. This way. That way. Loop it over.
Hold on. Can you make it a bit loose? It's getting tight. Ouch. I didn't expect that. They really changed the story with this remake. What? Where's that event flag-inducing growl coming from?
Nap Nap! There's a huge monster over there! Please help me!
Oh no, Compa! She's being censored and censored!
I'm not being censored! I'm just off screen, Nap Nap!
And of course, those were just in the storyline. The references continue into gameplay, with many of the monsters having obvious copycat designs of other franchises. For example, some of them being copycats of Pac-Man characters. I think there might have been one that was a copy of a character from Space Invaders. And of course, this enemy is a copy of, well, the slimes from Dragon Quest. And those cutscenes I talked about, they drag on forever, just like a bad skit. I mean, when you're playing this game, you might want to skip them, because if you don't, you'll be wondering, when will this end? Once you get into the gameplay, though, you start to notice the aesthetic of this game is extremely bland. I'm not even joking. This game looks just like Digimon World Data Squad on the PlayStation 2, aesthetically. And that is one of the most blandest looking PlayStation 2 games I have ever had the misfortune of playing. Except here's the thing, this is a Vita game that was a remake of a PS3 game, and I've seen better looking Vita games. And of course this is the PC version of it, so you'd expect it to look even better, but no. It just looks like blandness. I mean, there is nothing interesting about this game's art style whatsoever, other than the fact that the graphics are just so bad, and the fact that this requires DirectX 10, or according to the Steam requirements, OpenGL 3.3. But considering how there are better looking games using both DirectX 10 and OpenGL, there's no excuse for this game. I mean, even Phantasy Star Universe on the 360 was more visually pleasing, and that was like a 2005-2006 era 360 game. So now, let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is pretty frustrating. Early on, the game starts out easy, but the further you go, it just becomes a grind fest. And of course, the battle system's kind of messed up too, thanks to the controls. Now, the controls in this game are absolutely horrible. I mean, for example, to select several enemies. They wanted to make the game like a mix between a tactical RPG and, well, Final Fantasy XII's battle system. So, to select multiple enemies, you have to basically aim in front of you. And if you can select several while aiming in front of you, you can hit them. The problem is, selecting several requires time, as you have to wiggle and wiggle the analog stick until you can actually hit the enemy and, well, target them. And thanks to how the controls are designed, this is a pain, even when you're using an Xbox 360 controller like I was for this gameplay footage. I mean, this is one of the blander and more frustrating battle systems I've ever had to suffer in a Japanese role-playing game. And it's just not fun to play. I mean, once you play it, it's just frustrating, and it makes you wonder why they just didn't give you a conventional enemy selection, because the whole controls are just so screwed up in this engine that it makes it a pain to select stuff. And to make matters worse, I couldn't find a way to easily use my healing abilities outside of battle. I mean, I looked everywhere you'd normally look, like SP skills or your party options, like how you can in other Japanese role-playing games, but I couldn't find anywhere that would let me do that, and instead I actually had to use healing items instead. Now, maybe there is a way, but the fact that they made it so confusing to find, if it is there, is just not a good design choice. And that's the thing, this game is littered with bad game design choices all around. The music of this game is equally bland as well. And back in the day when you'd have Japanese role-playing games with not only fun and new memorable gameplay, but also amazing music that would stick with you, such as the music you'd find in games such as Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger, the Final Fantasies, Shin Megami Tensei, and more. And then you've got this game with some of the blandest music since Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. I mean, good lord. This music is on par with that when it comes to blandness and forgettability, and I guarantee you're never going to remember lines from this game for a while. Especially because of just how, generic it is. There's nothing memorable about this game's soundtrack whatsoever. My final verdict on this game is just garbage, okay? It's pretty obvious that they care more about stuffing as much fan service as they can in this game than they do the actual gameplay. And this game is targeted towards the same audience as the people who buy Dead or Alive for the jiggle boob physics. I mean, if you care about a character of questionable age twerking while you play the game, or if you care about, like, let's just say, having your character's boobs bounce up and down during a cutscene, this might be the game for you. However, if you're over the age of 13, you'd probably look at this game and wonder, what is wrong with this game? I mean, seriously, look at that character carrying the whole needle syringe, which in America would give people images of a heroin addict in the McDonald's bathroom. I mean, honestly, this game is just garbage. This game is everything wrong with the Japanese gaming industry today. And you know the worst part? Not only is this game getting localized, but lots of anime nerds and the like online are praising games like this. And of course, this game in particular too. I mean, you've got games such as Akaiba's Trip. You've got games such as, Automata's Excellent. You've got games such as Death Smiles. You got games such as the Touhou series. They also have lots of kawaii underage girls and fan service and similar stuff. I mean, not all of them have them underage. Some of them they look of age, but still. The fact that this game even exists and is for sale and is localized in America is just proof that the JRPG industry in America is dead. Games like this are the ones getting localized. And there's nothing redeeming about this game whatsoever. And you know the sad thing? If there were more Japanese games that were actually worth a damn coming out, these games would be flying under the radar, and nobody would even know about this game. But no, this is the kind of games that companies in America are licensing and localizing. Games like this. All while games such as Valkyria Chronicles 3 have sat for years and years, still not being localized. So all that really needs to be said is that this game is a poster child for everything wrong with Japanese gaming. And why nobody even cares about as many Japanese games anymore. Because let's be honest here, would you be caught playing this game on a bus or a subway? That's all that needs to be said here. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.